Thank you very much. So I get to start. I think I'm starting with probably the largest and most boring of all the standards, and also the one that I would not really call emerging, but rather evolving, because an XML full text markup has been going on HTML and XML for nearly 30 years, and so this is a evolving standard rather than an emerging. So what I'm talking about is JATS, which is now a NISO standard. Interesting thing about JATS compared to the older, what were DTDs, is that JATS is a tag suite. And by tag suite, we mean a vocabulary, a set of structures for describing all the components of content and metadata. And it's a vocabulary that you can then construct tag sets out of. So the JATS tag suite, or tag vocabulary, comes with 3 pre-made sets. The archiving and interchange set, which is very loose and is used for moving things from one publisher to another or so on. The journal publishing tag set, which is moderately rigid and was designed for publishers creating their own content in. And the article authoring tag set, which almost no one uses, is if authors were actually writing their own XML. It's very narrow and not very much used. All 3 of these are available in 3 different schema languages, as DTDs, as W3C schema, and RelaxNG. As I mentioned, FullTextXML or SGML has been around for a long time. That started back in the 80s with the AAP serial DTD and ISO 12083, and then the NLM, and now NISO JATS. I was on the ISO 12083 committee, and it was interesting that 20 years ago, we didn't have a lot of experience using full text markup. And the committee was really painful because people they were making it up, and we didn't have real hands-on experience to guide the standardization. And frankly, there were some publishers in the room who weren't really committed to ISO 1283, but were doing their best to derail it. I won't name names, but they were very large and very commercial, and normally vilified in the library community. But the world has moved on, and we all have a lot more experience with full text XML, and that led to the NLM DTD, which came originally a combination of NLM and the digital preservation community to become an archiving and preservation DTD. And now that has evolved and become widely adopted across the industry, and now we've codified it as a NISO standard as JATS. So what is this standard and what's it about? If you look at Wikipedia and just look up what's a standard, it will tell you that there's different kinds of standards, that standards either codify best practices or they define new practices for the future. This is a standard about community practices. It's about codifying best practices. It is not groundbreaking per se. And industry best practices, and it continues to evolve, and will show you how it's evolving. So common practice here, it's common practices, not a single best practice, because there's lots of options within the markup, and even within JATS there are some customization options. So JATS and its predecessor, the NLM DTD, are built on existing standards. It invokes MathML, XHTML, and OASIS tables, DOIs, ISO country codes, et cetera, et cetera. It is a frame for the text and metadata of journal articles, and the committee, we take it very seriously that we don't invent something just for the sake of inventing it. If there is an ISO standard for some piece that we can use, we do the best we can. So right now, you'll see in a minute on the table is Ruby, which is the Japanese standard for encoding accents on Japanese language and so on, things like that. So JATS is really about best practices and best standards and not reinventing the wheel and doing things in a way that can be communicated across the industry. If you go to the website, you'll see who's involved in JATS. These are the parties that have been on the working group and the steering committee. You'll see publishers, vendors, libraries, archives. It's been a great group, and every one of them is actively using and involved in this technology, which is a big difference from ISO 12083. And the standard continues to evolve in response to what does the community need to do. So in JATS, it's called JATS 1.0, but it's really NLM 3.1, meaning that it is backward compatible with NLM 3.0. There is nothing in JATS that breaks. So NLM 3.0 is a subset of JATS properly. And some of the things that were added came from the community. So we'd always had something called name alternatives, which was, so if you have a name in Japanese characters and you want to show it in English characters, then you can say, I have two alternatives. Here's the name in Japanese, here's it in English script, and so on. And we've had lots of input from the Asian publishers that they need to do this for not just names, they need to do it about collaborations and titles and so forth and so on. So we have enriched the markup to support multilingual almost everything in response to the community need to do this. Another one was citation alternatives, which is about marking up the references in two different ways and so on. Another community suggestion was publishers want to put the journal editor names inside the articles. Well, they're not a property of the article, they're property of the journal. So we added contrib group to journal meta. And we knew ORCID was coming, so we added contrib ID. We've done the latest things to support keywords and so on. And all of this comes from the community. It's not the committee invents things from scratch. And that's just the nature of this particular standard. So, and it continues to evolve. The steering committee met for the first time this Monday, and this is public information. It's on the NISO website. This was the agenda from the call on Monday. I mean, do we need affiliation IDs? Do we need to add more attributes on ISBNs, et cetera, et cetera? I won't read all of them. But the point is that it's based on community involvement. So, why would you use this standard rather than building your own publisher full text DTD? Well, you don't have to invent it from scratch, which is a lot of work. You benefit from the community knowledge, the documentation. The documentation set is enormous. I printed it out when AIP managed our transition, and we filled three 3-inch notebooks with the printed version of the online documentation. And it comes with a community, a discussion group. So if you have a question, point to the listserv, and you're going to get free consulting from everybody in the industry who loves this standard. And there is a conference. For 3 years, we've had a user group conference, and all of those proceedings are free and available on the line. So online. So there's a lot of stuff supporting this standard. Interoperability is a key benefit. I mean, if you're a publisher, you know, your typesetters, your vendors who want to do your typesetting will know how to do this kind of markup. If you have to send content to business partners, at AIP we send to 45 or more aggregators and metadata systems, and we're just a lot happier sending them an industry standard metadata rather than our proprietary metadata and having to deal with the pain that comes from being proprietary, and also the preservation community. The other value of using a standard rather than inventing it all yourself is that 20 years from now, there's still that documentation out there of what you did and how and why. So, a little snippets of the documentation to give you a sense. This is a page from the website. The documentation is not just about, here's a tag, what does it mean, how do you use it? There's also some essays on the best different ways to tag these things. These are all problems in journal articles. What do you do about keywords, affiliations, references. And there's essentially an essay on every one of these summarizing a variety of industry best practices and how you do it in JATS. So lots of cool stuff. And then there are pages like this for every element, and enormous tag library online. And additional community resources, there's a wiki hosted by the University of Michigan, thanks to them. And that's a forum where people are actually sharing tools that they're putting in the open market. And there's the JATS conference and all the proceedings from that and so on, and then the online documentation. So they asked us to put links in our slides so you could get to the important things. The top one is NISO's site. That's the prose version of the standard, sort of boring. The second one is the NLM site where the real documentation and all the DTDs and schemas live. So that's where you actually go to do your work. And then the final this is the standard committee. That's our committee page, and you can see what the committee is doing, and you can contribute suggestions and requests to there. So that's pretty much it, except how am I doing on time?
Good.
2 minutes?
No, you have almost 10.
Oh, okay. Well, so then I'll give you a case study. This is from AIP Publishing, LLC. We were a typical large publisher with proprietary DTD, which we built in-house. It was based on 12083 and so on. And in the last year, we decided to outsource our content and to give up on our proprietary DTD and move everything to JATS. We were the first large publisher to use JATS. And my XML team gave a paper on this at JATSCon, so if you want to read the prose version of it, it's available online for free. And it was a really interesting exercise because, we went through 20 years of markup and looking at what we'd done and cleaned it up big time. And there was a lot of funny things when we found in there. My favorite was there was a tag called Thesis Advisor. In 850,000 articles, it had been used 5 times. And it had never had any value. It was not used on our website. It was not used in the typesetting. It never gave any value. We could have migrated that to JATS and said named content type equals thesis advisor and preserve that. And we said, no, we're just going to throw it away. We actually have all of our old XML as well. We're not throwing the XML away. But we chose to aggressively clean up and tidy our markup and only retain what we actually use and adds value. And then we used that as a frame to do a new thesaurus and semantic enrichment and so forth and so on. So we were processing about 850,000 articles, and as a result of that, our 45 plus data feed partners got samples, and we've got a very nice message back from Elsevier, who said, this is the cleanest XML we've ever seen from anyone, which my staff was really pleased about. I gave little ribbons to everybody for that. They'd done a great job on that. So it positions us in a better place now that there is a robust industry standard to use that rather than to have to invent it all ourselves and leverage the documentation and all the rest of it, and as an opportunity to clean up. So, if you want to read about that in prose, it's available online. And that's really all I wanted to say about JATS. Okay. I'm happy to take questions if we've still got time.
We do.
So, yeah.
Any metrics on uptake for JATS yet versus a lot of people still using it in 123, some of them using it.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question, sorry, I'm hard of hearing, so the question was any metrics on take-up of JATS versus NLM. No, we don't have any metrics yet. Because the most recent version of NLM 3.0 was not backward compatible with the 2 series versions, that's a an obstacle. So people have to make that change. Once they make that, it doesn't matter which one you use, 3.0 or JATS, since JATS is a superset of NLM 3.0. So you can ask Adapon when they're going to switch for their hosting platform. Our hosting vendor is supporting JATS for us. That's Publishing Technology. But there isn't that much. Really, the difference is between NLM and JATS is governance. It's by making it an ISO standard, we're bringing it out in the public and making it, a community-based rather than giving NLM the final say on everything. So really, this is not an emerging standard. This is an evolving standard, and it's mostly about the governance rather than the particulars. But it does continue to evolve. Other questions? Bill?
Do you have any comments or an update on this?
Sure, and that reminded me that I forgot to say one thing along here. I was on a Crossref call yesterday, and Crossref is looking at supporting JATS as a submission format to Crossref, because Crossref is thinking about taking abstracts and titles with rich markup, and they would just use the JATS markup for that. So bits, so as I said, that JATS is a tag suite, and from that tag suite you can make multiple tag sets, and you could even make your own if you wanted to. There is another project coming out of NLM called BITS, which is Book Interchange Tag Set. And I'm not on that committee since AIP doesn't publish any books. So I don't know what the progress is, but I know the BITS committee is sending suggestions to the JATS committee for enhancements. So I think they are making progress. Other questions?
I have one question. So my question is, I know that JATS has been formally approved by NICE, so it's been voted on and is now truly and totally officially a standard.
Yeah.
So how does someone add to the element set if they want to do that?
Okay. Two ways. One is submit a request to the committee so that we can, understand it, and you might get feedback saying, there's another way to do that, or there is a better way to do that within the standard. But if it's something truly new, we'll put it on the agenda. In the meantime, there is a customization facility within the DTDs and a documented practice for customizing publisher-specific extensions to the JATS DTDs and schemas. So there is a syntax for doing that. You would go into so if you wanted to add a new element to one of the content models, you'd go into the parameter entity and override it with your customization. The problem with that, though, is if you then send the data to a business partner, you've got to send your customization, your version of the DTD or schema as well as your content. But it can be done. But really the best is get your idea out on the table and let's make it part of the standard.
Well, thank you
there's
very much.
One more over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, James Undergarden from Storage here. Evan, we're seeing a lot more people who are breaking out of the journal, article, books format and creating new types of content. Is JATS, obviously the J in JATS is journal, and the B in BITS is book. What would you recommend as far as structuring that content? Would you recommend that JATS would make its way into a more generic position?
Okay, so the question is other kinds of content and what's happening. I mean, we at AIP, we have magazines as well as journals, and we are using a subset of JATS with, choices along the way to describe our magazine content. The tag suite itself is very rich, so you could go a long way on almost anything. We're doing our conference proceedings in JATS as well. There are so many options and so much flexibility in it that's a plus and a minus. But it would depend on what the content is. I mean, It's a frame for managing the text and the metadata. So it's what is your business requirements for the metadata. So, okay.
Let's thank Evan very much.